365 Sports. Jerry Palm, CBS Sports Bracketology, is now joining us on Sikkim 365 Radio, 365 Sports. Jerry, thank you very much, man. Always a pleasure to have you on to break some things down as of right this second. So my question to you is, did Texas Tech win last night? Even with Baylor's resume and all the quad one wins, does that flip the script on who's a 2-seed or a 3-seed in your opinion?
It did, and it could change again, even though they may not play each other again until the conference tournament. Baylor's resume is obviously very good. They've got terrific wins, quadrant 1 and 2, and Texas Tech does as well, although not quite as many. But their losses are a little better. And to me, I ended up not really having a clear choice, so I went with the head-to-head sweep to make the decision. And it just happened that it turns out it was for 8 versus 9 overall, which is a 2 versus a 3. It could have easily been, 9 and 10 or 7 and 8, and nobody would have noticed. But because there's a seed line between them, you notice.
Jerry, you don't project anything out, do you? Over
No.
Yeah.
It's always as of if the tournament, ended today.
Yes.
Or I'm sorry, if the season ended today.
Yes.
And the tournament was getting it was as if today was Selection Sunday.
Yeah, so you're not saying like, okay, well, once these teams are not playing in their conference, they'll be better. It's what's happening right now, yeah.
And there's another thing about Baylor, which is that they haven't really been healthy. And now Chumwa Chachua, I hope I said that right.
You did?
Is out for the year. Their leading scorer has been out. They just haven't been 100% for a big part of this season, really. And it'll be interesting to see. I mean, obviously, Chumwa Chachua is not coming back. But, if they were to get otherwise healthy, how would this team perform? And that could have an impact on their seeding when Selection Sunday rolls around.
Jerry, in your latest updates, you got Kansas, as you put it, edging out Purdue for that final number 1 seed with Gonzaga, Auburn, and Arizona. What do you like about the Jayhawks right now?
It's their strength of schedule and the quality of their wins, and really only one questionable loss, the one to Dayton in that tournament back in November. It's taken a really good team to beat them. Now, Kentucky, of course, really pounded them, but this is a process that does not supposedly incentivize margin of victory. So that's just a great win for Kentucky. Obviously, you win at Kansas, that's a great win. But it's funny, I talked about head-to-head with Texas Tech and Baylor. Ended up being a decision point for me because I couldn't otherwise separate them enough. But I've got Kansas ahead of Kentucky, even though Kentucky won at Kansas. I've got Wisconsin behind Purdue, even though Wisconsin won at Purdue. So, head-to-head is not everything, and it's also not nothing. But in the Baylor-Texas Tech case, it ended up being a decision point because I couldn't really come up with enough to separate them otherwise.
Is there a chance, and Baylor does have, they got to win their next game against TCU, and TCU does a great job on the boards, and Baylor was hammered on the boards, but they do have Kansas at home. They have a game at Texas, and it's the Big 12. In your opinion, what is the high seed that Baylor, KU, or Texas Tech can get to if they were to do really well these last 2.5 weeks?
No, they could still be one. A one that's in play. I mean, it's going to depend on what some other teams do, of course. But, if you max out what you can do with the schedule, and that's the thing about the Big 12, there are no bad games in the Big 12 at all. You can't play. There isn't anybody at the bottom of this league that hurts you if they beat you. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's going to hurt you some, but it's not like playing Nebraska. It's not like playing whoever the worst team in the Pac-12 is, or Boston College. I mean, there's nobody like that in the Big 12. Kansas State and Oklahoma State are not far. I mean, Oklahoma State, of course, is ineligible, but had they been eligible, those are teams that are not that far from being on the bubble. They're not teams that really hurt you. So when you're playing in the Big 12, first of all, you don't play anybody that can severely damage your resume, and you're playing somebody that can help your resume at least once a week, more often twice. So the strength of this league really helps to keep the tournament quality teams higher up in the bracket and gives them a chance to accelerate better than most of the other leagues can do.
Are there teams on the bubble right now that you're kind of shocked you're sitting on the bubble if you had looked back 3-4 weeks ago?
Rutgers. amazing what Rutgers has done just in the last 2 weeks. 4 straight wins over, legitimate top 25 teams to build up. Now they've got 6 quadrant 1 wins, and they've also got 6 losses outside of quadrant 1. 3 of them, 2 quad 3s and a quad 4 to 315 Lafayette. So it's been a schizophrenic season for Rutgers. They got off to a terrible start, and they weren't healthy at the beginning of the year, but still terrible start. And now all of a sudden they're really hot. They beat Purdue in December on a last-second shot, but their run of play, their really strong run of play has come lately, and if they can keep that up, they can play themselves way up the bracket because the Big Ten gives them games that help them as well, and they're at Purdue on Sunday. So, if you can get a win at Mackey Arena, that would really be something for Rutgers' chances of.
Jerry Palm, CBS Sports Bracketology at JPP, as in JP Palm at CBS, on Twitter.
SMU, a team there, are they playing with a little bit of fire right now, Jerry?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, Temple's not the worst loss you can get in that league. That's a middle of the conference team. So, losing last night didn't knock them out of my bracket, but it's the kind of a thing where you just can't afford too many losses in that league because there are too many teams that hurt you if you lose those games. So they can lose maybe to Memphis and they can lose to Houston. And I mean, those are teams they're competing with. Memphis is for a spot in the bracket. But, and maybe you can lose to Cincinnati, but once you get past that, you start to really hurt yourself with these losses, and especially if you were to lose games at home. So SMU really has to be careful to take care of business in the games that they're supposed to win.
Jerry, of all of what you look at, and we have a slate that is on your bracketology of what you define, the quad 1, 2, 3, 4, and all of that, what order of priority is most important, or is there one?
No, there isn't. When you're comparing teams, what really matters is what stands out that's different, good or bad, about these teams as you're comparing them. So it could be quality wins at some point. It could be, bad losses. It could be strength of schedule. It just depends on, what stands out about the teams you're comparing at the time. But all of these factors are important. How you played early in the season versus how you play late in the season doesn't matter. They don't care how you finish. That's no longer a thing. But if all you're looking at is, on the site below my bracket, what you have is what I call blind resume data.
Right.
That doesn't tell you enough because not all quad 1 wins are the same. For example, in the ACC, if you beat Virginia Tech on the road, that's a quad 1 win. Virginia Tech isn't anywhere near the bracket, but it's a quad 1 win. It's a lot different than winning at Wisconsin, for example, than winning at Virginia Tech, but they're both quad 1 wins. So if you're not looking at the details, you're missing the story, and it makes it hard to just guess what's going to happen. So, the blind resume data is nice. It gives you some ideas, but you have to get into the details.
Jerry Palm again with us, Bracketology, CBS Sports on Sikkim 365 Radio.
Jerry, where do you project the rest of the Big 12? Do you think they'll get 6, 7 teams in, or do you think that the last couple weeks has maybe shaved some teams off the bottom?
Well, I think today's bracket has 6. Kansas State's not in it. Oklahoma State's not eligible. West Virginia and Oklahoma have a chance, but their biggest problem, each of them, is that they haven't done well against quality opposition, which they see, once or twice a week. And therefore, their overall records just aren't good enough. I think West Virginia is 14-11. I think Oklahoma's 14-12. So, if you're only 2 or 3 games above 500, your chances of making the tournament are virtually zero. Pre-pandemic NCAA tournaments, there's only been one team to get in that wasn't at least 4 games above 500. And that team played the most ridiculous schedule of all time. So I don't even compare anybody to them. So the historic, it's not a written standard, but the historic standard is if you're not 4 games above 500, you're not getting in. So for West Virginia and Oklahoma, that's their biggest problem, is to just get a good enough record to be considered, and then they have a chance.
A couple of questions from our chat room, if you're okay with it, Jerry. Is that
sure?
What about Boise State? They got hot. It's from Jacob asking about Boise State. Gary's asking about Boise State. Where are they in your pecking order?
They're in the bottom half of the bracket and have a chance to stay there if they can play well down the stretch of this season. They've had a good run of play in conference play, especially, they're doing pretty well. So, and the Mountain West is better this year. It's not usually a bad league anyway, but this year they've got a legitimate chance to put 4 teams in the field, which they haven't done. I think the last time they had 3 was 2015. So it's been a while since the Mountain West was this deep with quality teams. And then there are teams that are just outside the 4 that I've got in the bracket, like Fresno State, Utah State, that are decent teams, not quite tournament teams, but teams that aren't going to hurt you too much. So Boise State's got a chance. They have to win for teams. All the teams in the bottom half of the bracket are trying to push on, have to win the games they're supposed to win, because you can really hurt yourself, especially in a league like the Mountain West, by losing a game to somebody that's really not in contention.
How much does the committee look at the health of a team? You mentioned like the last 10 games, a trend that's not so much something that is
that's nothing.
It's not even anything anymore. And that's, it seems like there's changes. Something matters 1 year, and then 3 years later, maybe it doesn't. But how much does an injury issue create some discussion within the committee?
Well, they always, and the committee knows everything about these teams, like more than I could ever know as one guy trying to track stuff. The conferences feed the committee detailed information about player availability, coach availability, all of that kind of stuff. They know everything. But the fact of the matter is, if your resume is not good enough to get picked, you're not going to get picked. And that kind of stuff goes more into seeding than selections. And even then, the committee's not going to look and say, well, Baylor's best player missed this game and they lost. We're going to assume they would have won. That's not how it works. They don't ignore the game. They don't assume a team would have won. Losses are losses, and that's it. So, you still have to have a good enough resume to get picked. And then when they're talking about seeding, they'll look at the roster that's coming into the tournament for the team and see how that team did with that roster, and you maybe make some minor adjustments based on that, good or bad. But you're not going to see massive seed line movement if a team's coming into the tournament with an 11 seed resume and their best player missed half the season. You're not going to get moved from an 11 to a 4. You're going to go from 11 to 10 maybe. So, it's those kinds of things. Your resume really has to stand on its own, and those other things cause subtle differences, but not as much as people think.
You mentioned some things that no longer are important. And if I'll ask you this as well, what now, because quad, I'd never heard of the quad. The quads have been around. I'm not saying it's new, but, RPI was a big deal. Strength of schedule is a big deal. How often does it change, Jerry? And then like next year, will there be something else they come up with?
Maybe. It's a process that evolves for sure. They're trying to make it better. So, back, I want to say it's been almost 15 years. It used to be that how you finished the season mattered. And one of the things they look at was your record in the last 12 games. And that was nonsense then. And the committee finally came to their senses when it came to that, and they did away with that. And the reason is it's unfair to teams like Gonzaga, who have to prove themselves in November and December, because that's when they get to play the better teams on their schedule, to not really take into consideration, to not give equal weight to those games. So now it doesn't matter when you play the game. They used to have, I think they had conference performance used to be a thing. That was a long time ago. That doesn't matter anymore. Now you're just judged on your entire season, and how you do in your conference isn't even on the team sheet. They've started to look at metrics. I think that's a little bit, I don't think it has much of an influence on the process yet, but they've put like Ken Palm's rankings and the ESPN rankings and others on the team sheets now that weren't there, say, 5 years ago. So the net was created to replace the RPI in 2019. There have been several changes over the years as they try and make the process better. They don't ever want to get to the point where a computer is doing the thinking for them, and the basic standards are the same. This is a results-based process, and they want it to be a results-based process. So, nothing that they do, they don't want to take anything away from that.
Jerry, you're best at it. I appreciate it, man. Thank you for jumping on and being a part of it. Hopefully, if you don't mind, in a little bit, 2 or 3 weeks from now, I know it's going to be crunch time for you. We'd like to get you on again when we get close to the tournament. Thanks for your time and always the great job you do.
All right, sure. Thanks. Anytime.
Thank you. Jerry Palm, CBS Sports Bracketology. You know, he started out in a lot of different things, but one of the things he did that kind of got him some exposure was back during the days of the BCS, which really, would you rather have the college football playoff decided the way it is now or the way college basketball does it and has done it in recent years?
I'd rather have the college basketball way.
Because you take some of the human element out of it or the bias if there is any, and of course we're told there's not. What would you rather see, Craig?
Well, I mean, how many college football teams are we talking about? I mean, we doing 64 teams, and let's do it the basketball way. We doing 16, let's do it the basketball way.
Let's just say to decide the 8, 6, 10, 12, 8.
I mean, I guess more the basketball way. I don't
like the way that they do it right now at all.
Yeah.
But
you're talking about football.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So
it just seems like it's just a bunch of smoke and mirrors, and you know, every week it does change. Here, it doesn't change. Whatever he had as a bracketology 3 weeks ago, the only thing that changes is what teams do on the court. And it's not this, well, they look pretty good getting off the bus in a black uniform or something like that. On the James Akinjo conversation, I wish that some Baylor fans would listen to this. Zach S., because, you know, as good as Texas Tech is, do they have a point guard?
No.
True point guard?
No.
From a Texas Tech perspective, James Akinjo terrifies me. If I don't know if there's even a handful of guards that are top to bottom better than him, I would easily take a guy like that on Tech's roster. Now, would he fit what they do? I don't know. He was the mid-season All-American point guard right when Baylor, of course, was rolling through a 15-0 start. And, of course, that's changed quite a bit with others who are in and out, including Akinjo. So that's a note from Zach S. Zach, thank you for being a part of the chat room on Sikkim